Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Film for Fans podcast, the podcast from movie fans for movie fans. I am your host, Ryan Dunlevy, joined by my co-host, Rob Dunham.
It is a dark and stormy night.
It is. That
So
sounds
many
like,
good books and movies have started.
yeah. I was gonna say that definitely sounds like a quality start to a movie, and now it's just
Yeah.
quality start to the podcast. And it's a quality start to the podcast because we have a quality podcast in store for you. We will, of course, as always, break down the box office, what happened last week and what's coming up. We will discuss whether it's possible that Blockbuster is, in fact, making a comeback. Intriguing. And we will give you what to watch on Hulu and HBO Max. So we're going to have some fun picking out some movies on those two streaming services. So let's get after it, Rob. First up, we will talk about the box office. So number one at the box office this week was Shazam! Fury of the Gods. However, 30.1 million for this one. Scream 4 or 5, 6. Scream 6. I can read Roman numerals. Yes, I can. Scream 6 at number 2 at 17.3 million in its second week. Creed did 15.4 million. 65 did 5.9 million. And Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania did $4.2 million. So not a surprise that Shazam is number one in the box office. I will confess to being quite surprised at the number.
Yeah, consider that the first Shazam did $53.5 million its opening weekend at the box office.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's barely over half.
Really, really interesting. I had predicted 80 million. And so, I was more than a little bit off. What do you attribute it to? They can't be super happy with this total.
Well, I think part of it is that people are dissatisfied with DC.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think a part of it is that I think there's a real sense of superhero movie fatigue that is really finally starting to settle in. And we talked about this before with a lot of the shows and new movies that keep coming out. It's just there is so much out there that it's almost too much to keep track of.
Yeah.
I think unless you're a diehard fan of these kind of things, a lot of people just aren't willing to make that kind of investment, even though a movie like Shazam and its sequel are kind of really standalone properties. They don't necessarily need to know a lot about the rest of superhero movies, but I think they've, especially this newest one, I think has been grouped into that category.
Mm-hmm.
So I think some people are fearful to invest in that because of not knowing everything that's going on.
So you would attribute it more to general market forces as opposed to anything specific about Shazam itself.
Yeah, I don't think it's anything specific about the movie itself.
My thought is that I think it has a little bit to do with Shazam. I am wondering if the trailers really just didn't get people's interest. It was a little hard to tell exactly what direction they were going to go with it. I don't know that. I think you're right in that. I think in general, I think a little bit of superhero fatigue is set in. I also think that the announcement of DC going forward and the uncertainty as to what's going to happen with properties like Shazam probably also contributes to it, because this was another one of the movies that was done before the reboot of DC that's coming. And so I wonder if we're going to continue to see that trend with the DC movies that are coming out, given the fact that they're heading in a different direction.
It also was a fairly long movie.
Mm. Mm.
Um, I did go and see it in the theater, and I'll give some more specific thoughts about the movie. But I would say about an hour and a little over an hour to the movie, it kind of felt like a long movie.
Mm.
But it got better as it went along, and I ended up enjoying it. But it was definitely drawn out,
Okay.
and I think that a good amount of superhero movies are also perhaps guilty of that particular. I don't know if it's necessarily a problem, but it can be for certain movies.
It has felt like, in general, theaters and studios have pushed the boundaries in the last couple years on how long movies should be. And I don't know that it has always benefited from that. We talked a little while ago. I forget what movie it was towards the end of the year. It was like 3 hours long. It's like, who's going to go see this?
Babylon.
Babylon, yes. Who's going to go see this? I mean, you can't be that intrigued to see this storyline for 3 hours.
Yeah, not every movie has to be 2+ hours long.
No, no. I mean, there are a few movies that like you're talking about Avengers Endgame or something. You know it's going to be long, and so you kind of put up with the fact that it's going to be a long movie because you know they're going to deal with it. But the average movie doesn't have to be that long. Yeah, I agree. We'll talk about it later, but I saw 65 and it was a nice crisp hour and a half.
Hmm.
And it feels like it's been forever since I saw a movie that was an hour and a half. And like, this was refreshing.
Hmm.
Like they got in, they did what they got to do, they got out. It was good.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Yeah. So what do you think? Do you think Shazam is gonna hold steady, or are we gonna see another typical 60% drop off in the box office in week two?
I don't. I just don't think there's that much excitement about it. Honestly,
Yeah.
make it hold up for much longer.
I will say there is a bit of a crowded market in the box office, unlike what we've seen in the past. I mean, Scream, Creed, Ant-Man is still in. So it's not exactly hitting the box office at an ideal time. Um, but yeah, that's still an underperformance. Anything else to comment from there?
Not really.
Okay. So let's move on to our movies that are coming out this weekend. So we have 4 movies coming out this weekend. And one of them is, of course, the one I've been looking forward to, John Wick Chapter 4. Yes, John Wick Chapter 4, of course, starring Keanu Reeves. Has an excellent cast, and this movie is Wick seeks out the most powerful players in the underworld in his battle against the High Table. Yeah. So this is the next chapter in his ongoing saga. Um, so that is one of your options. Another one is The Lost King. And The Lost King features Sally Hawkins and Shona Price. I think that's the right name. And this is an amateur historian defies the stodgy academic establishments in her efforts to find King Richard III's remains, which were lost over 500 years ago. So that's The Lost King. Next, we have A Good Person, and this stars Florence Pugh and Morgan Freeman. And in this story, this follows Allison, whose life falls apart following her involvement in a fatal accident. And then finally, we have School of Magic Animals. And pull it up. I think it's slow. So School of Magic Animals, which at the moment I know very little about. because it's not pulling up.
I think there's a school in animals that are magic.
Okay, there we go. All right, now we're getting closer. Sometimes my Wi-Fi gets a little weird here. Um, so this one stars Amelia Meyer and Leonard Conrad, and it is Ida must transfer to a new school where she soon realizes the students are unkind to each other. However, all of that changes when a new teacher, Miss Cornfield, begins to educate them on the values of friendship and magic. Because when I think of two things that go together, friendship and magic. Yeah, yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Um, so that's School of Magic Animals. So we have four entrants: John Wick, Lost King, Good Person, and School of Magic Animals. All right, Rob, what'd you think of the new entrants to the box office this week?
Well, obviously, the one I'm most excited about is also John Wick. So,
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think there's minor intrigue around the Lost King. I'm gonna have to check that out a little further just because I like the idea of, doing something involving history and that sort of thing. But John Wick is definitely where it's at, man. I am very much looking forward to these. I'm actually in the process of trying to rewatch the original three, and every time I watch them, I'm just blown away by how it's elevated what is kind of just a shoot 'em up movie to an art form,
mm,
and everything from the cinematography to the lighting to the editing to the sound and this use of the soundtracks to um, the mix of martial arts and gunfight. I mean, it really, they're beautiful films.
yeah, and also Lance Reddick
Yeah.
just recently passed away. He was also in the show Fringe,
Yep.
uh, Lost, among others.
The
Uh,
Wire, I believe.
yeah, and he's really good in these movies too. So I believe this is the last movie that he was a part of.
Yeah, yeah, I was going to mention that as well. Lance Reddick, rest in peace, and we will see him in the box office this weekend. So I know I for one am very psyched about John Wick Chapter 4. What do you think the audience is gonna react to this? What are you expecting from the box office here?
I think it's really hard to predict because it's definitely a very violent movie.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Keanu Reeves has a lot of buzz around him. This series has a lot of buzz around it. Um, 50 million, maybe I'm underestimating how many people like this movie
Well,
because I think it'll be very solid, but I don't know if it's one that people go crazy over watching.
I'm
When it,
trying to look up to see how much it made. Opening weekend, it did 50. The third one, John Wick 3,
mm,
did 56 million in its opening weekend, and did a U.S. gross of 171 million and a worldwide of 328 million.
okay,
So 56 million is pretty solid. And this movie, um, John Wick Chapter 3, was 2019. So you're getting the pre-pandemic
yeah,
box office numbers on that. So I think you're probably right in around, you said 50?
yeah, 50 is what my
I
guess
think
would
you're
be.
probably right in around the 50 million mark for that. I'm guessing that you may get a little bit of siphoning off because of the amount of movies that are still in the box office. But I'm guessing it's going to come in around 50 million. Do you think this will be the last jump?
I do not.
I do not either. Though I do believe like they're going to have to create another storyline here. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think we're running right up against the limit of how long they can push this continual storyline, because basically the first three movies all kind of, if you haven't seen them, the first three movies all basically run together, like they start right where the other one stopped, and so it's kind of like one long story. And I think you can only get away with that for so long. Like you have to at some point wrap up that storyline. So I think there's a future for John Wick movies. I just think you're gonna have to somehow expand the universe out or come up with a different plot line or
Mm-hmm.
wrap it up. Okay. So that's what's coming out in the box office. Now, an interesting story has popped up, and I saw this just today, actually. And news is buzzing around that perhaps Blockbuster is attempting a comeback. Now, early on in our podcast, we are now 100. This is our 123rd episode. Early on in our podcast, we did a lot of discussion about Blockbuster, both like the last Blockbuster in Bend, Oregon, as well as the fact that we missed Blockbuster Video and what it meant to the movie industry. But they might not be dead. Uh, Apparently, Blockbuster.com is back online, and it just when you go to the website, it just says we are working on rewinding your movie.
Hmm.
Also, their official Twitter feed at Blockbuster is back up.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So I don't know what this means. There's no releases, there's no press on any of this. Uh, but that seems to indicate some sort of movement for Blockbuster.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be hard to believe they would reactivate this for no reason. I'm curious as to what this means. What do you make of this?
Yeah, I'm just really wondering what kind of space Blockbuster fits into
Mhm,
currently. Is the brand name strong enough to actually matter to be in the space?
mhm.
Is the first question, I think. Obviously, people are very interested by it, but that I think that's all because of nostalgia and what Blockbuster was, which obviously will not be again.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting that we've seen, like, I don't know if those who listen and watch have noticed, but there are like a lot less red boxes around these
Yeah.
days. Like they're getting um, less and less. And so the question is like, are we very close to approaching the point where like you can't access physical media outside of like going to the library and getting it because
Or
there
just
are
straight up
not a whole
buying it.
yeah, there are not a whole lot of options for borrowing physical versions of movies anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, I mean, that has me curious. That has me curious as to what a relaunch Blockbuster would look like. Um, I think you're right in that I think it's been gone long enough and there's enough sort of nostalgia that it would be a positive buzz to have Blockbuster back in the movie industry. But I'm very, very curious as to what a relaunch Blockbuster would look like. So what are you thinking? Is it online streaming? Is it some kind of subscription service? Do you think there would be any room for any physical stores of any kind whatsoever? Even a reimagined experience or some kind. What do you think a relaunch Blockbuster is going to look like?
I mean, I really kind of do think we're past the point of a physical location because I just don't see um, what would be unique enough that would cause people to utilize it the way it used to be utilized now that we're in the era of streaming. In fact, I can really only see it being a streaming outlet. And the question is, what kind of connections could they make even for streaming with everything so segmented and already claimed as studios have their own streaming services, as Netflix is producing their own content, as Amazon is producing their own content. I can't imagine there's a huge financial group backing up Blockbuster who are going to start spending millions, if not billions, on content. I mean, this was not in our show notes today, but I saw this article today that Apple announced they are going to start spending $1 billion a year on movies, including getting them into the theater. So, with that kind of money being thrown around, I don't really know how you enter that field and make a splash. So I'm really curious what the motivations are behind
Mhm.
whoever's running these accounts and what on earth they're doing. Maybe they're just planning on selling a bunch of Blockbuster merchandise to people who feel nostalgic about the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I could see I could see you doing something like a flagship store, a flagship physical store where you could go in and it looks like a Blockbuster. Um, and maybe you could, I mean, maybe you could have, they would have some sort of interactive experience or something like that where you could do that in one or two locations, have like a flagship store and sell merch and that sort of thing. I have a hard time seeing you rolling out significant amounts of physical stores and with all that overhead. I think my mind goes to two places if they're going to bring something back. And one, it would be as in a partnership with a legacy studio as their exclusive rights distributor. We've seen that model going over and over, particularly with Warner Brothers and HBO Max. We've seen that specifically. I think I forget what the other one is. There's some that are. It's starting to coalesce. Obviously, Disney has their release, and they're starting to see it coalesce where studios have their preferred streaming service. Paramount is another one. Um, I could see potentially if Blockbuster, if they were able to negotiate some sort of deals where they would get exclusive rights to stream particular services, stream movies from particular studios. That would be something I could see that would make sense. But once again, what you'd be doing is continuing to contribute to the fractured nature of streaming and the fractured nature of where your content is. The other thing I could think of is if they could somehow figure out if they would somehow land in the nostalgia space where somehow they could get the rights to all the like the 80s and 90s movies and you would have they'd be like an exclusive streaming for that genre of movies like 80s, not like anything 20 years old or older, you know, something along those lines. You've seen this with other services. There's like um, services for old films like 20s and 30s and 40s, like with I'm blanking out on the name of the service, but you can get streamed for those sorts of things. I wonder if they could go whole nostalgia and do something like that.
That would certainly be intriguing.
Because I mean, you see some of that stuff in other places, but I think there's a sense in which that type of stuff gets drowned in the glut of content. Okay. So what do you think it would need to succeed? Is there anything that you can think of that would be like, okay, if they did this, they would succeed?
Well, I think first of all, they would need a very clear and coherent plan that they're able to communicate,
Hmm.
which I think has been the downfall of the majority of streaming services,
Yeah.
because they seem to kind of be pulled in several directions all at once because they're trying to come out with new content. They're trying to have things that people always want to watch, trying to have classic stuff on there too. And I think that none of them really believe that they can succeed if they focus on one thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's to the detriment of all of them.
Yeah.
So like I'm interested in what you described as a model because that would be a very concise and clear vision. Um, but I don't know if that would have enough traction for people to be
Yeah.
interested in it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure, but I think you're right about that clear, concise plan. I mean, like back in the old days, it's like you went to Hulu when you wanted to watch TV episodes. Like that's where you went. You went to Hulu. And that's how they gained their notoriety. Or you went to, the early one, you went to Netflix for the content that they had. But now with there's so many and there's so many different things, it's like, man, you just don't even know. And you don't know you don't know how. And I mean, I was talking with some friends this weekend. It's like we're talking about, oh, I watched this movie this weekend. Wait, which streaming service is that on? I don't even remember. I just had to look it up and see which one it was on. And that's a big problem in the streaming industry is, I mean, you can't even recommend, oh, you got to go watch this on this one because you don't even remember what streaming service it is on half the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm intrigued, and so we'll see where it lands, and we'll see if anything comes of it or if it's full of sound and fury signifying nothing. All righty, let's move on to our discussion. So we thought we'd revisit something we normally do on a regular basis, but we haven't done in a little while, and that is to recommend movies. That's what we do. So we're going to pick two specific services. We're going to do Hulu and HBO Max, and we're going to recommend some movies for you to watch on these streaming services, and then we'll try and turn it into an article and put it on our website as well. So we'll do HBO Max first, and Rob's got his list for what to watch on HBO Max, and then I will do Hulu. So what you got, Rob?
So I've got a couple series here that are on HBO Max, which HBO has several series, as in like 2 or 3 movies making up a series or more, that you can look through, which is really a good way to digest content, like all of the Harry Potter movies, for instance, or James Bond, for where those movies are, etc. It's good to go someplace where they all are, so that you can kind of work through them. The first series that caught my eye was The Expendables. They have The Expendables 1, 2, and 3 on HBO Max. We've talked a lot about how there's not a ton of good action movies out there. These were quite enjoyable, I thought, and had a very star-studded cast. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Pretty much anyone, Jason Statham, anyone who's been a major action movie star at any point, like from the 90s until today, is in these movies. And some of the interactions with them are very funny because they play up some of the, back and forth that they had as action stars in their eras. And it's got some good repartee and some good dialogue and some exciting heist type stories. I mean, they're not peak cinema or anything, but they're fun to watch.
Yeah, that's interesting because I saw all of them in the theaters, and I don't think I've seen any of them since.
Huh.
So
So you can watch The Expendables on HBO Max.
yeah, I could.
The other series that I saw, the third one is now out in the theater, or the first 2 Creed movies are on HBO Max. So if you're considering going to see the third one, you should probably brush up on the first 2 by rewatching them on HBO Max. If you have not seen the Creed movies, I think they're very well done. I wouldn't put them in the same category as the Rocky movies, but they are above average sport movies and very good boxing movies. I do like Michael B. Jordan as Adonis Creed, Apollo Creed's son. So Creed 1 and 2 on HBO Max. The third one, Tenet.
Yes.
Tenet,
Yes.
you need to go watch Tenet.
Yes.
And repeat, you need to go watch Tenet if you have not seen Tenet yet. Tenet on HBO Max.
I actually spent like a half hour watching videos people made that like using like models, like dialogue, like what was actually happening in certain scenes, going forward and reverse, and following the characters around, because it's that type of movie. It's the type of movie where you have to watch multiple times, and you are desired to watch all this other content about the movie. Yeah, it's that type.
Another one I'd recommend is Misery, starring Kathy Bates and James
Caan, right? James Caan.
Yeah, I forget which James it was for a second there. But yes, James Caan. About an author who gets trapped in a blizzard, wakes up being cared for by a middle-aged woman who turns out to be his biggest fan, and it goes completely bonkers from there. But yeah, Misery by Stephen King. Very interesting movie, to say the least. And then the last one I saw that I would recommend you watch is the original Shazam,
Ah,
uh,
yeah.
first one with Zach Levi. Um, I thought it was a very good movie. I thought it was very different tonally than a lot of superhero movies that came out. Like I said, I feel like it could very much stand on its own as just a movie when not all superhero movies can do that.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say that if you have not really watched a whole lot of superhero movies and you're worried about dipping your toes into it, like I said, I believe some people might be dealing with the superhero fatigue or being worried that they don't know enough to enjoy a superhero movie. I would say that you can certainly enjoy the original Shazam on HBO Max without having to have any knowledge
Yeah.
uh, of superheroes. It's really just a story about middle school boys who get superpowers
Yeah.
and then act accordingly.
Yeah, I think I'll make two comparisons to this. If you've ever seen the movie Big, 1980s movie, Tom Hanks, there's an element of that kind of intrigue in the movie, that play. Also, I would, similar to I would it's not stylistically like the movie Venom, but I put them in the same category because they
Hmm.
were kind of character superhero movies that I wasn't expecting a lot out, but end up really enjoying. So, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I think both those comparisons are apt.
yeah.
So that's what I would recommend watching on HBO Max.
Awesome. Okay, so let's move on to Hulu. Um, Hulu, the first one I'm going to recommend is The Count of Monte Cristo. Just came out on Hulu, and this is a classic movie. It's really really good. Um, Guy Pearce and now I'm
Jim,
blanking out. Jim Caviezel. Yes, Jim Caviezel. Uh, the classic Alexander Dumas story. Um, it's really really well done, I think. This is a personal favorite of mine, and I actually, like, it had been on some streaming service like a couple months ago, and I started watching it and couldn't finish it, and then literally the next day, it left the streaming service, and so now I've been really itching to watch The Count of Monte Cristo. So I'm glad to have it back. It's a classic story of revenge, bitterness, um, you know how to let go, all those type of things. So Count of
yeah,
Monte Cristo.
it's one of those slow burn dramas that's actually worth being one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the scenes where they're in jail with Richard Harris, where he's in the prison with Richard Harris. Those are some really really good scenes. um, Next one, couples retreat. Couples retreat, I actually really like this. This is a couples romantic comedy, and this came out in 2009, starring, there's a lot of actors in this. Vince Vaughn is in it, Malin Ackerman, John Favreau, Jason Bateman, Kristen Bell, Kristen Davis. And it's basically like four couples who, to varying degrees, are struggling in their marriage, go on um, a trip to this exotic paradise, and then have to work through couples counseling, and hilarity ensues. So it's good, it's heartfelt, and it's the type of romantic comedy where men and women can enjoy it in equal measure, which is not always the case. So couples
That's
retreat.
interesting because I'm going on a couples retreat this weekend in the
Ah,
mountains. But
yeah,
there's going to be a lot more than four couples there. And I kind of feel like the focus will be a little different where I'm going.
it's very possible. Next up, I'm going to do Jumanji. Jumanji was really, really good. This is the updated version, the version that came out a couple years ago with The Rock and Kevin Hart and now I'm blanking out.
Jack Black.
Karen Gillan, Jack Black. Yes. Um, I really like this reboot. I thought the characters were interesting and compelling. The comedy was good. The storyline really worked. Um, and it's a good one that's kind of a family movie, but it's still a quality movie.
Yeah,
So
I'm a big fan of this one. I saw this when Lancaster Bible College went to play Christopher Newport University in Newport News, Virginia, in the first round of the NCAA tournament. That night, I went and saw it in the theater, and then I saw it in the theater. I think 2 or 3 more times after that. It was really good, and I had to watch it with other people.
yeah. I think I saw it a couple times myself.
Interestingly enough, not a basketball podcast, but Christopher Newport University just won the national championship, Division III, and
Really?
they beat the team that beat Lancaster Bible College this year in the NCAA tournament
Hmm.
at the buzzer. So the two teams that beat LBC within the last 8 years played each other in the national championship, which is kind of a cool thing.
Yeah. It's also kind of like bad luck of the draw for LBC.
Yeah, yeah.
um, yeah. Next one up for me is Dunkirk. Uh, Another Christopher Nolan film on the recommendations list. This one is slightly different than a lot of his other ones. He still does some messing around with time as he interweaves storylines, one that takes place over a week, one that takes place over a day, and one that takes place over an hour, and interweaves them all to create one narrative. Um, it's a fascinating story to put you in the perspective of individuals who were experiencing the events of Dunkirk. If you're looking for like a movie that is, like giving you the wider historical significance, you're not going to get it with Dunkirk. However, you are going to get a great, gritty, in depth look at what it was like to experience that on an individual level. I also think you should see Dunkirk because it might be a good precursor to Christopher Nolan's next film, which is coming out, which is Oppenheimer, which is another historical pick. So to give you kind of a sense of what you might encounter thematically, and how Christopher Nolan handles historical context, I think that would be a good that might be a good precursor for you.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm very much looking forward to Oppenheimer, so I might have to watch Dunkirk again.
yeah,
It's a good shout.
yeah. Lastly, I'll go with Dante's Peak. Dante's Peak, classic 90s uh, disaster movie. One of my favorite disaster movies, actually. And that's Pierce Brosnan is in that one. He is the main star. And Linda Hamilton is his co star in that. And basically, he's a volcanologist and he goes up to a small town to attempt to determine whether or not the volcano is up for eruption. And of course, you know that in fact it actually is. Uh, but there's good character interaction. They build up the story. They do a good job of building up the tension to it. And some movies are like 3/4 disaster and like 1/4 lead up. I think this one has a better balance to it than a lot of other ones do.
My favorite part is when the Terminator jumps out of the volcano and fights James Bond.
Yes. So that's what to watch on Hulu. Kind of Monte Cristo, Couples Retreat, Jumanji, Dunkirk, Dante's Peak. Okay. That is our discussion. So let's move on to our watch list. Movies that we've watched over the last week. Rob, what did you
So I
watch?
watched Shazam: Fury of the Gods. It's the main thing I watched. I went to the theater. Um, like I said, pretty drawn out movie. The first half of which I felt like it was kind of plodding along a little bit. Um, the story picked up, and I felt like the ending was a pretty good payoff. However, DC does not know what they're doing with Wonder Woman, and I don't understand why they keep using her because it seems pointless. Um, in this, so have you seen? You have not seen this yet.
Not this one. I went. Sorry, I went to see 65 instead,
Yeah,
but I'm
I mean,
planning on seeing Shazam.
yeah. So like she's in the trailers, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
She's in
Yeah.
some press stuff that has come out. Like her one big line is in the trailer. So like I just don't understand the point
Yeah.
of having her show up, because the concept of Deus ex machina, where something or someone comes out of nowhere to save the day, when it's actually like a literal god. Like, I don't know if they get how hammering the nail right on top of the head and lame this is. Like, I really don't like, and I'm not trying to be mean, but I don't think anyone cares about Wonder Woman.
You could not have screwed up Wonder Woman more than they did with Wonder Woman 84. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know if you were trying, I don't know that you could have screwed up Wonder Woman more than they did with that movie. And it was just, I'm so glad that was one of the first things they axed, because it gave you some indication that somebody else running that studio understands how bad of a direction they were headed with Wonder Woman.
But so to like include her at the end of this movie as the climax to the movie just felt really lazy, and it just seemed like just another indicator that they don't know what they're doing,
Yeah.
because it didn't resonate, it didn't land. Like, I guess it was supposed to be this huge moment, it didn't feel like a moment at all.
Mm-hmm.
So overall, I thought the movie was good, but um, I'm not surprised after seeing it that it didn't do more in the box office, and I don't think it's going to do super well going forward, because I just don't think it's not like a high quality movie in my opinion.
Yeah.
I watched some other things, but mainly TV shows. But I will say, I do feel like I have to say this because it had been brought up several times in past podcasts. And all this is not a TV series show. I am proud to inform Ryan that as of Tuesday evening, I have watched all 8 original seasons of Dexter.
Hey, there you go.
And my only comment on that is I'm really mad at Dexter. Um, he's an idiot. And now I'm really wondering what on earth they did with this new season. And I've intentionally not read or watched anything about the new season they came out with,
Okay.
because I want to go into it and be surprised by whatever it is. I know that I've heard the only thing I really know is that some people were not very happy with it. Beyond that, I don't know anything, and that's fine with me.
Fair enough.
But man, I wish they could find a way to make a movie
Yeah.
out of that character.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think he is a fantastic character.
Oh yeah.
Even if I'm really annoyed at him for what he did, I still think he's a really good character.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, sometime we'll have to, I mean, we can do this from a movie perspective, perhaps, but we'll have to talk about why people have such trouble creating good endings
Hmm.
at some point, perhaps.
Yeah.
But uh, one thing I watched was 75. It's the Adam Driver movie currently in theaters. I thought the original premise is that a human somehow accidentally goes back 65 million years. It is not. And I'm not giving much away because this is literally told to you like right at the beginning as the movie is starting. So um, basically, it is a long ago existing civilization from far away. Someone accidentally crash lands on an unknown planet, which turns out to be Earth.
Hmm.
So what you
So
have,
Planet of the Apes.
yeah. You have so basically the plot of the movie is Adam Driver is the pilot of this vessel, and he's carrying cargo of crew that are in stasis. Only one of them survives, and then he has to try and navigate her through prehistoric, prime Jurassic era Earth. And so you've got a little bit of Jurassic Park kind of themes going on where they're being chased by dinosaurs and they're trying to escape dinosaurs. Um, but there is actually some decent emotional elements in the movie. The one thing I would say, like it was probably done for what they believe to be historical accuracy, but I didn't love the colors of the world, like the colors they used, the way they portrayed prehistoric Earth. I just didn't. I wasn't immediately drawn into the scenery. It wasn't a whole lot of like pristine views and um, you know this amazing look at an Earth. It wasn't so. I would say the actual settings and sceneries were slightly underwhelming, which I think is a missed opportunity for a film like that. Now they might have been doing it because they actually believe that's what Earth looked like at that point in time. I didn't read a lot about that, but I think it was a missed opportunity. But overall, good movie. And like I said, it was an hour and a half. So it felt like they understood that this premise could hold for this long. And it was good. I mean, I enjoyed it. Um, I also watched a couple of 90s action dramas, Few Good Men and Murder at 1600. We had talked about A Few Good Men during our ranking of 90s movies, and I wanted to watch that one again. I still love it. It's probably on my list of all-time favorite movies. I've seen it a bunch, but I love the intrigue of courtroom murder drama type stuff, and this one adds a military spin to it. Also, along the same lines, Murder at 1600, which stars Wesley Snipes, and basically a someone gets murdered at the White House, and they bring in a local DC cop to investigate, and he's getting the runaround. So it's another good murder mystery. There was a lot of good movies in this particular action drama genre in the 90s. It was a widely used genre throughout the era, and there's a bunch of good movies that fall into this category. I don't know that we've seen a ton of movies along these lines in recent years. I kind of wonder why that is. To come back to that. Um, and my weekly movie challenge for this week, I've been following that feed, is to watch one of the favorite movies of someone you care about. So in this case, I watched one of my wife's favorite movies with her the other day. And so we watched So I Married an Axe Murderer.
Ah,
Yep.
classic.
So I Married an Axe Murderer. This, of course, is early Mike Myers, like 1993 Mike Myers. You get some great looks at an early 90s cafe. There's some great early 90s cafe scenes in there. You can also see the development of characters that would then later end up in his widely popular Austin Powers series. You can
Mm-hmm.
see some of the precursors of those characters in So I Married an Axe Murderer. So fun to check out. All right. You got anything else, Rob?
I do not.
Well, that is the show. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into Film for Fans. Make sure you check out filmforfans.com for our movie recommendations, breakdowns, and all sorts of other fun stuff. And tell your friends about the podcast. We'll talk to you next time. Until then, enjoy the movies.